going to introduce Europe and try to explain some of the key of geography landforms. So we think about this region. It goes from, some would argue, from this tip over here, the international date line, which is that dotted line, to Greenland. Some would say Iceland, but like most things, it's probably somewhere in between. So we're going to say it's going to begin, in terms of the eastern boundary, it's going to begin with this mountain chain right through here called the Ural Mountains. If we go ahead and go to terrain view, perhaps we can see that a little bit better. We can see that particular mountain chain if we zoom in here. So everything on this side is very European in terms of when we think about Russia. We go way out there, yeah, it's a lot of land. It's a lot of empty land. A lot of agriculture. But anyway, so Kazakhstan, is it European? Possibly. They would definitely like to be called European, but we don't know. We're not going to really say that. We're going to call them Central Asia. Where's the southern border? Here we have the Caucasus Mountains. We've talked about them beforehand with the Middle East. And so here we have actually the highest point in Europe, if we do call Russia in this particular part of the world Europe. Like we said in the earlier part of this section, some say it's not. So we have our first key water bodies, the Caspian Sea, but also the Black Sea. And so then this also gets us to one of our very important, of our first of many peninsulas, the Crimean Peninsula, which is this right here. And so this is something that's increasingly in the news. It's being debated as far as, is this part of Russia? Is this part of Ukraine? Which is why we have that dotted line. And so the Black Sea. Just south we have Turkey, which is another peninsula, the Anatolia Peninsula. So it's surrounded on three sides by the Black Sea, the Aegean Sea, and the Mediterranean Sea. We also have another peninsula, the Balkan Peninsula, surrounded by the Aegean Sea, Mediterranean, and Ionian Sea, but also we have the Adriatic Sea. So all of this here is referred to as the Balkan Peninsula. So it goes from Greece all the way up to these particular smaller countries right through there. Adriatic Sea on one side, Ionian Sea on the other, Tyrrhenian Sea on the other. That's another peninsula. That's the Italian Peninsula. Just south of the Italian Peninsula is this very small touristy country called Malta. It's its own country. This is part of Italy. This is a part of Italy, and this is a part of France. These are part of Spain. In the mountains between France and Spain, we have a physical boundary that separates the two countries, but a cultural boundary, of course, the French and the Spanish, two different cultures, but tucked in the middle of Mountainous Area, we have the country of Andorra. Once again, I've mentioned this beforehand, in rural areas, but in rural, mountainous, rugged areas, you're going to be more likely to have cultures preserve themselves. And so in the case of Andorra, it's been able to preserve itself, and a lot of it has to do with its kind of isolation up there in the mountains. Another example of a very small country is the country of Monaco. It's essentially a city-state. We also have in Rome the Vatican City, and another very small city-state, very small example of in Andorra is San Marino, which is essentially inside the country of Italy. So we have a lot of these interesting countries that are inside other countries, which can be complicated. So we have another peninsula here, the Iberian Peninsula, and on one side we've got the Mediterranean, the other side we've got the Atlantic Ocean, and then the Bay of Biscay. More peninsulas even in the country of France. We've got the, if your name's Brittany, well, there's your peninsula. We've got two kind of countries, kind of not countries, that are underneath the British rule, Guernsey and Jersey. They kind of just rule over themselves, and if they ever need anything, they go to the British. It's very similar to the Isle of Man. Not going to go too much into that. Here we have the British Isles. So the British Isles includes the island of Ireland and the island here that includes Scotland, Wales, and England. We also have very small countries through here, but they're very, very densely populated. So not a peninsula per se right there, but very, very, very dense urban population. Of course, way out here we have Iceland, and some would say Greenland as a part of Europe. Then we have another group of peninsulas. This is all referred to as Scandinavia, but each of these are essentially individual countries with their own peninsulas. We also have another peninsula here, Jutland, which is part of the country of Denmark. And we have these very important seas, the North Sea, and we have the Baltic Sea. We've got the Faroe Islands, which is a part of Denmark as well. So Faroe Islands and Greenland are kind of both kind of part of Denmark. They're part of what they call the Danish realm. So we have these other seas and small little areas. The moral of the story is all these seas and gulfs and what have you made this area as historically very much dependent on maritime activities, and so navigation. They over time perfect it. They get good at it. So a lot of fishing to the point of overfishing, but a lot of the exploration of their marine areas. And so this is one of the things we add to why is Europe so developed. A lot of it has to do with all these various water bodies and peninsulas and coastlines and tinkering and innovations of different groups over time. We now have the Baltic States over here, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And we have a complicated situation here where we have this country that is actually Russia. So Russia is actually separated and actually has access to the Baltic Sea in this particular location. This is something that is when we think about geopolitical situations. People are fearful in Europe of Russia expanding its territory. And so at any time, Russia could say, well, right there, this is where we're located. Well, we could just claim these areas. They used to be part of the Soviet Union, where, they're already kind of in between us. There's a lot of characteristics that are similar. And this is something to kind of keep an eye on, once again, with the Crimean Peninsula, where we have a potential conflict. I want to go back to the terrain view. I didn't get a chance to talk about some mountainous areas. Now we're going to go more inland. Talked about peninsulas and seas. Now let's talk about some mountainous areas. And so we talked about the Pyrenees. We also have the Alps. The Alps go through here, very rugged, next to the Caucasus Mountains, probably the second highest in terms of elevation, very rugged in this particular area. Also in the Balkan Peninsula, we've got different mountains. We've got the Dinaric Alps, and so this is just a conglomerate of this rugged area, this mountainous areas over time, different times in terms of mountain creating processes, created all these various rugged features. It's not just like one collision of a plate boundary created this. It's been colliding for a while. We also have this particular mountain chain through here called the Balkan Mountains. Another kind of very similar to the Alps in terms of shape is the Carpathian Mountains, which are right through here that kind of stretch around through Romania into Slovakia. And so just to zoom out, we go to the Earth view, some bigger picture things. We look at different colors, so we can just see the darker greens, particularly in northern Russia and Scandinavia. That's going to be very similar to what we've seen beforehand when we looked at Canada. So when we looked at Canada beforehand, we saw similar, very dark colors, and so very similar climate. That's kind of that tundra and taiga, the boreal forests, so dense forests, but also a large amount of grasslands through there. But right through here, we're going to get a lot of agriculture. So we can imagine this is very similar to the Great Plains. And especially as we get through here, we get more like a semi-arid steppe, like we would find as we go across the Great Plains and go towards Colorado. Very similar. So this is what we call Europe's breadbasket. How we saw the Great Plains in the Midwest as Northern America's breadbasket. But the moral of the story is we got, for the most part, a lot of green. And so green means we get a good amount of precipitation. Some exceptions to that, we got some orographic precipitation, but also as we go to the south here more, we get the subtropical high pressure dry area, the Mediterranean climate, which is a particular climate region that I'll talk about in the physical geography.